Hi, and welcome to the Storied Human. This is Lynn Thompson. This episode tonight is with a friend of mine who I met in our podcasting class, and I've gotten to know her pretty well. And she generously offered to be interviewed. And I'm fascinated with the work that she does because she runs a podcast, a very successful one, I might add, called The Estranged Heart. And what the Estranged Heart tries to do is give support and community for navigating the emotional storms of parent and adult child estrangement and repairs and transforms relationships with one another in healthy and productive ways. It's a big goal, but Kreed Revere finds herself achieving it. And I'm really so glad that this podcast exists. I'm so glad that you found your way to doing this. We have a mastermind that meets every couple of weeks, and we're sort of like the Kreed Revere fan club because we really admire your success. First of all, you're very successful, and I have to congratulate you for that. But it's what your success came out of. It's you're exploring this area that people need you to explore. So I also wanted to mention that you're a pretty interesting person. You describe yourself as an out of the box person, a bit of a philosopher, a bit of a mystic, and I think that's true. Um, and you legally changed your name in 2012. And I found it really intriguing when you told me the story. You chose your name, Kreed Revere, and somebody from a spiritual group that you had been part of, where you had been called Reverend. She noticed that the last couple letters of your name. Will you tell me? You tell me how it goes. I'm botching it.
That's okay. Thanks, Lynn. No, the first three letters of my last name
Of your last name.
are REV.
It's
So
Rev.
the abbreviation
It's right.
for Rev.
It's right in there, and you
Yeah.
didn't even try. Like that's
Did not
unconscious.
did
Yeah.
not put two and two together until she said something about it. Yeah.
Now tell me just a little bit more about your personal background. I know you have two children of your own,
Mm-hmm.
and you have an interesting and you were a police officer,
Mm-hmm.
and you were a surrogate. Tell me about that because that's pretty intense. You were twice a surrogate.
Yeah. Yeah. I had my two daughters and knew that my family was complete. And I remember back, I don't know if you remember the baby M case that
Yeah.
was back in the late 80s. And I had just had my first daughter when that case was in the national news. And I remember thinking as a very young mom, my heart was just ripped apart by what was happening with this baby. And I just thought there has to be a better way. I just kept saying to myself, there has to be a better way. And I didn't know anything about surrogacy at that point in time in my life. But I just had this kind of there has to be a better way on the back burner. And so I go on with life and had my second daughter, and then ended up I was never in a place in my life where I felt like I would have been supported as a surrogate mom. And I had later come to find out, what all was involved with it and things like that. And so I just kind of, tabled that idea and thought, well, would be a lovely thing to do, but I don't know that I'll ever be in a place where it would be feasible. And so then I met the love of my life, and end up, I remember, she came home one day and I said, so I have this thing I want to do. And she was always so supportive of anything that I wanted to do. Like there was just no questions asked. It was okay to do. And I said, I want to be a surrogate mom. She looked at me like, what?
A little bit of a surprise, right? Little surprise.
It was just totally out of left field for her. And so anyway, that is what started me on that journey. And about a year and a half after I had that conversation, I ended up meeting the intended parent for my first set of twins. I carried two sets of twins for two different families.
Wow.
And And when I tell this, when people find out that I've been a surrogate mom, they tell me, what a gift you've given, and these types of things. And I tell them, it really was a gift to me. I really, it truly, it was a very pivotal point in my life. Taught me a whole bunch of things that I had never known about before. And, helped to bring 4 human beings into this world and create 2 families. And so very unique experience. Learned tons. And it was just, it was fantastic. Really
That's
was.
amazing. I think that speaks to you being ready to go through that,
Mm-hmm.
to really feel it and to go through the transformation. It's so cool. I
Yeah.
just love that you did that and you helped 2 families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was interesting. There were, there were lots of sacrifices on my part as well as my family, because of the umpteen million doctor visits and all the things that come with that. And, it was really interesting because at the point when it was happening, I didn't really realize. I mean, I knew I was going to all these appointments and things, but I didn't really realize the true depth of the sacrifice that my family was making in order to also help. So I also talk about that today. I'm like, it wasn't just me. It was me and my family that helped make this possible for other
right.
families.
It's everybody. You're right. It's
Yeah.
a big thing. It's a big thing. And not everybody could do it.
No, agreed. One of the questions that I get asked most often when folks find out I've been a gestational carrier, and just for clarity purposes, I was a gestational carrier. So I was the oven. There was no DNA. My DNA was not a
Got
part
it.
of
You were
these
a
kiddos.
carrier.
So I was only a gestational carrier. So, but the first question I'm always asked is, how could you give them up? And I always tell people they weren't mine to give up.
Yeah, you
It
had that
was
in your head
just
from the
the
beginning.
babysitter, basically, is how I looked at myself. When I had the kiddos and then I went home after the first set, it was really, I had a really difficult transition. And it wasn't because I didn't have the babies. It was because I had spent almost a year of almost daily contact with this intended parent.
Yes.
From some form or fashion, whether it was over medical things or just interest and things like, preparing, hey, just want to let you know the baby's moved today. Hey, this happened today. Really filling them in on what this pregnancy was like so that they could be as much a part of it as possible. And so then when they go home with babies, of course, then their life is like, turned upside down, and inside out, and they don't know which end is up. And then I'm home not having this daily contact. It was like I had lost, it was almost as if I had lost a best friend, really.
That would be so hard. And I would imagine you crash after, just, it's a crash.
Yeah. It was
Not the easiest
very
thing.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you hear from them at all, or?
The first set I do, they are 18.
Oh my gosh.
19 years old now. And the second set at the end of this month will be 17. Wow. I'm not in contact with the second set. It was for an international couple, and they do live in another country.
Oh.
And so I haven't, very, very different experiences with both of them. The first set, the parent, it was a single parent, and the parent wanted me to be as involved, and they wanted the kiddos to know who I was and what role I played in their life and that type of thing. The second set was very different. It was just very different. So I haven't seen or heard anything about them since they were 3.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So totally different experiences.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm just amazed that you could do that, not just once, but twice, and twins both times. You're a badass.
My OBGYN would probably differ when I showed back up in the office with the second time, and he was like, twins again. Yeah, that was cute to see.
You
his
don't
face.
hear that all the time, right?
No. Yeah. So yeah, it was interesting. And both sets were not just twins both times, but boy girl twins both times as well.
Oh.
So yeah. So very
That's
interesting.
so cool. One pregnancy and boom, you got a boy and a girl.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So tell me how you came to this place where you knew we needed your podcast.
Oh my goodness. So I was an estranged mom. Both of my daughters estranged from me in 2016. And it was, there have been 2-3 times in my life that my life has hit some crisis points. And, you think this is the worst of the worst. And for me, the estrangement took the cake by far. It was devastating to me. I lost all sense of who I was. I didn't know which end was up. It just really, really was emotionally devastating to me.
Hard to live with. I can't imagine. Yeah.
Very. And I share with folks that, I said in the middle of my estrangement, you kind of think as a parent, if everyone in your life were to walk out, that the people that would remain would be your kids.
Right.
Like if your partner left, your parents pass away, your siblings don't talk to you, whatever, your kids will always be there.
You always have your kids, right?
Right.
I think we all assume that, and it's not true. Not necessarily true.
And I found out that was not true. We have since reconciled. And reconciled. I was estranged from one daughter for about a year, and the second one for about 2 years. And so we've been reconciled longer than we were estranged now. And we are in a very much healthier place in relationships with one another. However, it took monumental work on my end to get there. And that was what really has been the catalyst for this podcast. I had people ask me, when they learned of my estrangement experience, do you have a book? Have you written a book? Have you, and I'm like, no, I
just went through it.
I've just gone, this has been a personal experience. I know none of that has been on my radar. I did start a couple of support groups. When I was in the middle of my estrangement, well, both of them really, but one really took off after we reconciled. And that I started to see how prevalent this was when I did not realize before how many parents go through estrangement, and the absolute utter heartbreak that was happening.
Devastation. And people don't talk about it. I don't think of it as something prevalent. So there was a real need there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so I started working with moms. They would reach out to me, how did you reconcile and things like that. And so I had a friend of mine who encouraged me to do a podcast, and I was like, a podcast? What is a podcast? I knew what a podcast was, but like me doing a podcast.
How do you do it though? How does one do one? Right.
Right. Like I had no clue about anything. And that's when I happened to come across, Kathy's course and the course that you and I were in, and it kind of took off from there, and it has turned into something that I could have never dreamed possible ever.
And the best things are like that. I mean, that's what I think. That's what I feel about you. You plugged into something real and authentic, and you stay in the zone and you go with it. And it's almost, outside of you, it grows.
Yeah.
It's not like you're focused on growing it, but it's a natural result of you following something very true. Like,
Yeah.
your North Star is, I love watching you grow. I mean, it's just so fun. And it's very inspirational to the rest of us to watch what you've done. And I love how you say that so often, like, I never could have imagined, or you're surprised when people give you, tell you how meaningful it is for them. And I think that's what people say when they're just in the zone. They're not thinking about whether their voice sounds good, or whether
Right.
they can get more readers or listeners, or I still say readers because I'm a
Yeah.
writer, more listeners next week.
Yeah.
And that's what makes you, just so centered. You're very centered about what you're doing. And
It's
I'm just tickled that it's grown so much and it's so influential, because I really think you're helping people who needed to be helped.
totally, totally. I mean, estrangement's a very shaming thing.
Yes. Yes.
Parents feel, especially moms, feel a lot of shame when their kids estranged from them. And if you feel shame, you're not likely to talk about those things with
That's so
anyone.
true.
And so then it becomes very isolating.
Yeah.
And so when they find someone else who has been through that and has made it out the other side, it's almost like they're clinging to like a life preserver that, oh my gosh, please help me to figure out what to do here, how to make this better. Because it's like you said, it's devastating. It's not just a heartbreak. It is utter. I mean, I was
Yeah.
on the floor in the fetal position. I mean, it was
Yeah.
how do
And
you get out of that?
we say we don't know how prevalent it is, but as I think back, there's always been family members of either people I'm close to or my own family. You hear these stories about how, and she never spoke to her son again, or he never spoke to his
Yeah.
father again. And I always think, really? Like, you didn't repair it? Like, this is horrible. You just don't even know how people keep going. And I do know a family, the mother stopped speaking to her brother. I mean, she's in her 70s now, and it was like maybe 40 years ago. And something happened. We don't know what it is. God help us. I mean, they write novels about this kind of stuff. It's just
Right.
unbelievable, the tragedy. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's generational. You generally find, which is, and this is another very interesting piece of this, is that, so here I find myself estranged. I'm working as an estrangement and reconciliation coach. I have this podcast, and I'm recording an episode one day, and it hits me like, I mean, a feather could have knocked me over at that point. I was like, oh my God, I was actually also an estranged adult child. I never knew that word, estrangement, when I was
Right.
young. And so I just had these periods of time when I didn't talk with my mom because I was mad or pissed off at something, and
Right.
but that's exactly what estrangement is.
And you didn't have the name for it. I totally get that. Like, you're
Yeah,
reevaluating times in your life and you call it by its actual name. And
exactly.
it's so true. I think a lot of people have times in their life like that, where they maybe when they were younger did not know how to deal with stuff that
Yes.
happened. And so you just, talk to the hand. It's
Right.
easier to just cut off communication,
Right.
which of course doesn't do anything for anyone except depress everybody and make everybody bitter and sad.
Right. Right.
It's not a coping
Yeah,
mechanism. It's
it
not a
is.
coping.
Yeah, exactly. So I really have, and that, affords me a unique perspective, because I can come at this from the experience of an estranged mom and understand that pain. Like, I mean, I until my dying day, I will always remember what that pain was like. It was just something forever etched upon my heart. But also, I can come at it from the estranged adult child's perspective as well, and know what they're trying to get to. It's just
Yeah.
many of them either don't have the skills or don't, there's tremendous fear in stepping back into a relationship with a parent who's disappointed them or let them
Yeah.
down or, abuse them or all sorts of things. And so, and that's what I hear from a lot of people that reach out to me, is that they really appreciate the fact that and I get that from estranged parents, are like, I appreciate the fact that you can see this from both perspectives.
It's unusual
Right?
and very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So you were made to do this, I think.
I think so, and it's interesting because we have times in our life that bring about immense pain, and the one thing we want to do is just make it go away and don't ever talk about it again and don't ever do anything, just, I want to forget about this time in my life and just go on with life, just go on with getting on. And I am not that type of person. And I feel like I experienced this so that I could help other people. Because if you are not estranged, if you've not experienced that, you do not know what it is like. You cannot know.
You can't know. You can't know.
Right. And I've had people who have asked to work with me versus their therapist on the estrangement piece because of that very reason. They're like, I can talk to this therapist, I can talk to this person over here, but they don't get it. They don't understand what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing.
Therapists are great, but they're only humans,
Totally.
right?
Yep.
And they can't know everything,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Wow, that's so cool. So there's like this space, if you will, this need, and I think you're filling it so well. And people just let you know by the growth of your podcast, like, we need this. We really need this. And I think it's just much more than talking about estrangement. You're teaching people how to be healthy again.
Right. And
that's approach things in a healthy way.
Exactly. I hear so much. I'm like, I hear moms say, I just want things to get back to the way they were. I just want things to be normal again. And I'm like, no. You don't want that, because that wasn't healthy. That's what got you where you are today.
That's what led to the estrangement, right?
Exactly.
It wasn't normal, whatever you're thinking, right?
Right.
But it wasn't but isn't healthy. That like what we're taught? We're always taught to like stuff it down and keep on going, or we're going to bounce right back, and it's just not real. And
it's so not real.
Well, I noticed you posted something about people saying, they didn't use these words, but I really related to what you posted on, was it Facebook today, where you talked about people saying, you're feeling too much, or you're, I've had that my whole life. You're too sensitive. You think too much. You're feeling too much, let go of it, blah, blah, blah. But actually that's more normal if people realize like what we should do in life.
Right. Well, and it's not just that it's more normal, it's healthy.
Yeah. But I mean, it's not what society really understands yet.
Right.
We're reading a book in Sandy Cohen's, she does Inner Peace to Go, and she does self-help books, and the latest one we're reading is called Bittersweet, and I think you would love it. Oh my gosh, it's so beautifully researched. She took 4 years to write this book, and it's about the power of melancholy and that bittersweet feeling, and how so much comes out of that. And how, I thought this was really fascinating, how American society it doesn't embrace melancholy. It embraces sanguine. You're always peppy and happy and positive, no matter what. Like, you're ready to die inside, but you're supposed to be positive. And it's that toxic positivity. And so your post on Facebook today really hit me, because I'm embracing that about myself the last several years. I took a quiz online about how sensitive are you, and I'm really sensitive, and so is my son. And yet, are we? I mean, this is just how everyone should be, probably. I mean,
right.
They even said there's a theory that people who are very sensitive, that we retain those skills as man evolved, because we smelled the fire first. We heard the animal approaching first. We could tell the poison. We could smell or, whatever. We had more, that there's a reason that that's been retained. And so I just felt so validated by that. So you're just naturally like that. I mean, you didn't have to I had to work on, not listening to other people and being myself, but you are naturally like that. You said, I'm not that kind of person. You aren't going to just stuff it down.
Well, yeah, but I did it. I was not necessarily, it was not necessarily a healthy way when I was younger, because I was very, my mom, I love my mom. But my mom is a very proper Southern woman. And she is very much, you are the good girl. You sit down and you're not to be, you're to be seen and not heard. Don't make waves. Let's not rock the boat, those kinds of things. And I'm all about rocking the boat and lifting the carpet up and saying, what's under here? Let's look under here, And yes. she really had, she did not know what to do with me when I was young, because she was not receptive to that. I became very angry, because I was like, I'm trying to be who I am and you're not accepting me for who I am. And so then I became very angry. And then I entered into a career where I got even more angry, right, as a law enforcement officer and working in the field of public safety. And so I went for the majority of my adulthood being very in touch with my feelings, but in not so healthy ways. And it took this estrangement and years of weekly therapy to get me out of that and to become soft and more tender. And I'm still myself, but it's in much healthier ways, right? Yes. I don't have the amount, I can get angry, but I don't have the volatility involved with it anymore. Right. And I'm much more tender and soft and things like that. So, yeah.
So now, so you sort of readied yourself as the vehicle for what you're doing now. And exactly. I just feel a spiritual component to this so much, like you had a calling and you prepared yourself. It's just such a journey, and it has that feeling of God calling you, using you. It has that feeling to me.
Agreed.
And I felt that at different times in my own life, and I don't even know what to do with it, because I'm very confused about what I believe. But there's definitely that spiritual feeling of, I was called here to do this. Because I had this experience a couple of years ago where I worked at a company, and they said, oh, you'll be this writer and you'll help us design, how we're going to do everything. And we have this person to help you. And she used to work at this company, and, she was a mechanical engineer, but she really wants to be a tech writer. I started the job, and it was just not really what they said. It was so much harder. And I felt really bad for this person, because she was sort of shoved into this role, and I had to train her, and it was like driving us both a little crazy. And it really was difficult. And I lasted for 9 months at this company. But we're still in touch. And she's had some troubles recently. I just reached out to her. I sent her an email this summer. And it's so powerful. I was called to help her. I don't know how or why these things happen. I was not enjoying it, but I look back on it, and it seems perfectly natural that God used me in that way. She desperately needed that job, and especially the benefits, because there's all kinds of things going on with her health. And we used to talk about it, and she'd say, I can always talk to you about my health. And I always, I didn't have the level that she did, but I had health concerns, and it made me more compassionate, and I could talk to her about it. There was such a strong feeling now, when I look back, of being used by God in such a good way, like just being used to help someone who really didn't know how to get there any other way. And I actually feel good about it now. So life is so weird, the twists and the turns.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's interesting. What is that? Someone once told me, if you want, we often say, I want to have my dream job, and I want to, I want to be used for good and all of these things. And then God comes along and delivers it and drops it in your lap.
Wait a minute.
And you're like, anything but that, not that, please. Right?
It's so true.
And it is absolutely true. Absolutely, utterly
And I'm sort of stunned because I was like not enjoying it at the time, but I cared for her, you know, and now I see that, you know, she's safe. She has benefits. She has her job that it was so important for her to get that job.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I made it happen and didn't even understand at the time that I was doing
Right.
something that was worthwhile. I was just like, meh. I was kind of like bitchy, basically. Yeah, I was. Not to her, but to my poor family. Yeah.
Right. Right.
But there is such a mystery to things and why we're called to things and how we're used in a good way.
Absolutely. And that's another thing with this work. I mean, I'm a firm believer that when you're on your path, and you can say, on God's path, on Spirit's path, whatever terminology, whoever you believe, whatever. But when you're on your path, things in life just kind of fall into place. It doesn't mean that you still have to take action, and there are still things that you have to do, but it becomes you're not beating your head against the wall. You're not spending hours up at night thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to make this work? Blah, 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 blah. It just seems to somehow happen.
Yes.
And that's exactly what has happened with the Estranged Heart. Like I said, I went into this, we just had my 1-year anniversary of the podcast on Halloween. And I checked today before our interview, and I have over 25,000 downloads.
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
In my first year. And I'm like,
congratulations.
How did this happen? Like,
yeah.
I could have never, I don't have any paid advertisers. I don't have and this is another thing. Like when I started the podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to get the microphone and the this and the that and the other thing. And I finally was just like, I sat down, picked up my iPhone, downloaded the app, and hit record. And that was it. That was it. Like,
one thing I loved about Kathy Heller's course, it sounds like something she would say. She would just say, oh, I take pictures with my iPhone, or I just hit record and start talking and do it messy, jump in and do it. And then you're more likely to just be really who you are.
Right. And that's
rather than over planning and being the A student. Yeah.
Right.
What I'm impressed with you is you trust this process.
I do, but I don't know that it's, I have to say, I don't know that it's a conscious trust. Sometimes, a lot of times in life, I'm flying by the seat of my pants, but there's also a piece of me that's just like, I know where my limitations are. Like, I know tech is not my thing. Like, it's just not my thing. I can't wrap my head around it. My day job, I tell my boss, she's always working up spreadsheets and stuff, and she loves numbers. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, you talk numbers, I speak humans. Like that. I don't know how to talk your language, right? My language is very different. And so, but that is the thing that people really liked about my podcast, that when I got feedback, was that people could hear my dogs in the background. They could hear them, their tags were jingling and scratching, and they're like, you're real. Like you're real.
That's so true, Kreed. They're in the room with you.
Yeah.
And you're talking to them.
Yeah.
Because they say it works best when you're talking to one person. And I'm sure my friend will get a kick out of this, but I often talk to my friend Kim Snow in my head because I've known her forever. And we always had amazing conversations. So I talked to her, but it works best when you're focused on just talking and when you're natural and you're all those things. I just feel like so much in your life led up to this and you didn't even know it. Like it's just all led up to this. Yeah. It's like when people write a book about you, that's what they'll say. They'll say, or when you write your own book, you'll figure it out. You'll say like, oh, I realize now all these things. This was my path that was leading to my path. And I don't feel like I've realized my path yet, but I do have those moments like you're talking about. I do have those moments of just totally doing something for pure joy for the podcast. And I could do it for 8 million years and I don't resent it at all. And I have a full-time job and I want to do it at night. Just that love of connecting and just feeling like you're putting something out there that you want to connect. And that's, that's why I write, and writing does that. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was time to find literally my voice.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
I feel like with your voice, like I feel like you could have done this in a lot of different ways, but I think presenting yourself, your real self, and hearing your voice, I love how intimate podcasts are. You
Yes.
know, it's just so amazing to me that they exist. Somebody was really confused about it, one of my friends, and she's like, well, when do I tune in to hear you? And I said, well, it's not radio.
Yeah.
It'll just sit there. The episode will just sit there for you. And she's like, oh. And I said, don't worry about it. You can tune in anytime you want, and you can always listen anywhere you want. But I said, it is like personal broadcasting. It really is. It's like we have a studio in our bedroom.
Yeah.
I'm sitting at my desk in my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And, thank God for Zoom.
Right.
Totally. I remember when Kathy was teaching us all this stuff, and some of the stuff she had that tech person, and she was showing us stuff, and I was like, what? But Kathy said one wonderful thing. She goes, somebody said, well, what do you use to record? And I was like, oh no, another complex. Right. Because I'm really good with tech, but it's the tech that I use in big companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is new to me. Yeah. And I move around probably a little easier than some people, but still new. I still have to learn it. Mm-hmm. And I remember she said, oh, we'll just use Zoom. And I was like, this woman makes like mega millions. And she uses Zoom. I'm so happy, and then Zoom records it for you and you just use the audio. And I was like, I'm in heaven. One thing that's kind of easy.
Yes, absolutely. Totally.
I really wanted to ask you if somebody's two things, okay? If somebody is estranged, if they're living in that, what's one thing you wish they knew?
Besides you're not alone, because that's a huge thing. You feel like you're the only one on the planet that's
going through this. And the shame does that. Yeah, it isolates you.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I was certain that I was the only horrific parent out there, right? That, that kind of thing is. And second, the other thing that I would want them to know is, as difficult as this is, there is something in it for you.
That's difficult to grasp at first.
That's very difficult. Especially when you're newly estranged and you're in the throes of it. It's really hard to see that there's something in that for you. But as someone who's been through it, once with my kids and several times as an estranged adult child, and I've come out on the other side, I can assure you.
Very powerful. The only thing I can relate to a little bit is that I lost my mom kind of young, about 21 years ago. Mm-hmm. And very suddenly. And the grief that hit me, my children were still little, and it was really, really tough. And it reminds me, I can relate a little bit because of, people would say, you'll make your way through, you'll never get over it, but you'll learn to live with it. And I'm like, I'll never learn to live with this. And it was just, not that everybody's grief isn't hard, but I've lost lots of other people since her, and it's always been hard, but it's never been like when I lost her. Yeah. And I always say I make a joke out of it because that's what I do. I'm a type A personality. So I didn't just have grief. I had complicated grief. So I had grief for so long. It became depression mixed with grief.
Right.
And I did a couple episodes on it, but I felt too, like you were saying, I feel years later that, and I went to a therapist and I had lots of good help and I worked through it. I feel like I can help other people now in a way that is very powerful. People say when I write about grief, they just cling to it. Mm-hmm. And people say when I talk about it, they just take it in. And I feel like you're describing something similar. As painful as it is, it's a chance to make your way through something that will leave you changed. And then on the other end, possibly being able to help others. And that's so powerful. So my other question was, if I know someone who's experiencing estrangement, what can I say to them that would be helpful?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Listen, that's the first thing that comes to mind is because it's so isolating. If someone is reaching out and telling you about it, there is a level of trust somewhere in that. And please don't violate that trust with them. Allow them to talk about it. And even if you don't know what to say, simply holding that space for them and allowing them to share what's on their heart and their feelings, and to say to them, I hear your pain. I hear your pain. Don't try to take it away from them. Don't try to tell them you'll fix it. Don't try to tell them tomorrow will be better. Don't any of those. Just sit with them.
Just be in it.
Be in it with them.
I gave the same advice to people who were grieving. I think it's similar. I think it's such good advice. I think we were taught to like talk. When I went to therapy back then, it changed how I dealt with my kids and their tears. Definitely. Because she identified this like heavy thing that I did. And I think a lot of us do it, where I just stuffed it down, you know? And being very sensitive, there was a lot to stuff. But I would rather be strong. So I would get pissed and I would stuff it down. But she said, you know, you can't, she was very gentle too. I loved how she talked to me. And she said, you know, that you can't do that forever. It doesn't go away.
Yep.
You're going to have to deal with it someday.
Exactly.
And I remember she just encouraged me. It was such a simple message, but I think it's really important for people to hear. Sometimes and I'm sure people who are in estrangement feel this way, like you feel like it will never end and you can't even feel it because it will just never end. Like you'll never stop crying. Totally. You feel like it's just too deep and you can't even go there. But the therapist said, no matter what, you have to feel it. And it will ebb. You have to have faith. It's like walking through you know, I always pictured a tunnel, you know, and she said, you just have to keep walking. Yeah. And you will reach the light. You will. Not that everything will be perfect, but you will move through these feelings.
Exactly.
There's no other way but to feel them. So I came home and I decided, I think the kids were like by then 6 and 4. And I just decided, like, when they cry, I had heard this thing where you don't break the hug, you let them break the hug. And that's what I did. From then on, that's what I did. It was such a simple thing. And I noticed, I'm going to start crying because I noticed they hold the hug so much longer than we do because we're always in a hurry and thinking of dinner and the next thing we have to do. They don't have those stresses. They will hold that hug for a really long time. And so I felt like that therapist just gave me this gift that I could give to my children. And I didn't shush them anymore. I didn't rush them. I let them cry. I wasn't perfect, but I tweaked what I was doing. And I was able to give them that gift from my therapist. And I remember that sadness. I remember feeling I had never felt that sad in my life. I said, I wrote, I didn't know you could be this sad and still live. Yeah. Yep. I think that's so scary for people when they're going through these terrible things that, God damn it, you wake up and you're still alive. Yep. And I think that's so shocking for people, right?
It's shocking. And on the other side of that, they're like, this is going to take me under. Like they feel like they can't, like literally cannot breathe because the pain is so intense. And you describe a tunnel. I reference this back to labor and birth. I'm like, so
very much so.
Right. So you're in labor and you're like, you know, because there comes a point in time where most of us in labor were like, okay, I'm done. I'm out. Like,
that's such a great way of saying it.
I don't want to.
No, we're not going to do this. We thought we wanted to do this, but this is too much.
We have to keep going. We
can't. Fantastic analogy.
We can't stop. And
you have to give birth to the new, whatever that is.
And it's painful and it hurts and you feel like it's going to rip you apart and you're just not going to make it and all of these things. And then on the other side is this, you know, at first there's this exhaustion, this relief of, okay, now it's over. And then you've got to figure out this new way of being in the world, right? With this new baby or this new thing in your world. And so, when I usually use that analogy, people are like, like
that's such a great analogy. Yeah. And it works on so many levels. So I felt like when I finally came out on the other side that I was still sad. I was still, carrying my mother's memory. It was still tough, but I was deeper. Yeah. I had like this depth to me that I never had before. And the crazy thing that happened, I would meet people everywhere that would talk to me about their grief. We were like a secret society, right? Because people don't know what to say, and they don't talk about it that much because they don't know what to say. And I would just mention a little something to the cashier, for example, and she would tell me her story. And I just felt such a communion with people. I felt like I came back to the world of the living and I was connecting on that level.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It really, if
there's
you
gifts.
allow it, if you allow the grief, because there's a lot of grief and estrangement, if you allow the grief to, in essence, take you under, if you allow it to do what it is meant to do, it will transform you into something that you don't recognize. However, you come out thinking, oh my gosh, I'm this, you feel like a newly born baby. Like there's this newness, this freshness about you. And for me, I came through this with this whole new perspective on life, as if, you know, a new baby comes into this world not knowing anything about anything. And that's kind of how I felt, like, you know, really exploring this whole new world that I found myself in, and really learning how to talk. Like I work a lot with parents on communication and how to talk. It's almost a new language. We go through all of these steps. I'm like, you have to crawl before you can walk, and it's, you know,
It's such a great analogy. Yeah, it makes so much sense. Yeah, it's you're reborn in every way.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And it's so great that you teach people that it is something, as horrible as it feels, it's something that you can move through.
Yeah.
You know, all of these things are, and we're not taught that. I think especially, you know, I'm older, and the way I was raised was just like, you know, these German grandmas that just toughed it out. Nobody ever had anything wrong with them. Everybody was like barking and sweeping the floor, and everything was fine. And oh my God, I talk about it on my podcast a little bit. Like, I only remember that people would have like nervous breakdowns. Like they would wait so long, and they would be depressed for so long or anxious for so long, and never, you know, no one went to therapy. We were lower middle class, you know, at least my grandmas were. And nobody, you know, therapy. What the hell was that? Right. It was like, you know, it's like going away to camp. Nobody did that. So literally people would, I'm laughing, it's not funny, but I mean, people literally would just keep on going until they cracked.
Exactly.
And it was so sad, you know, and we were told to always stuff down anything, you know, stuff down your pain, stuff down your, you know, mourning was supposed to happen in a year. That's what always cracked me up. Like, you know, it's been a year. Come on, chop, chop.
No.
And I remember even somebody in my family said that to me, and I was like, well, it's been 2 years and I'm still sad as hell. So there you go. Exception to your rule.
Exactly. Yes.
Excuse me.
Your own timetable.
Bell curve, you know.
Yep. Oh my gosh. I'm not, the very first thing I hear from moms is when I meet with them and they inevitably start crying, and the very first thing they say is, I'm sorry. I'm like, no apologies here. Tears are always welcome. Always. And I do that in my day job. I do that anytime I encounter anyone who feels awkward and crying or expresses, you know, I'm sorry for crying. I'm like, oh my gosh, please cry. I need you to cry. I need you to let that stuff out. It needs to come out and cleanse. Your tears have a purpose. There's a purpose.
Yes.
For them. Yeah.
That's very powerful. So now I have a question for you. How do you keep doing this? Like, what do you do to renew yourself or to relax or to de-stress? How do you handle this? Because you do something similar during your day job, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big reader. And because of a mutual friend of ours, he has suggested that I pencil myself in on my own calendar, you know.
Oh, excellent. Yes. What a great idea.
And so
you're starting to make sure you
every
do that.
Sunday morning is my time when I don't take appointments. It's my time to do whatever it is. I spend time with my grandbabies, and that helps to bring me back to what I call it brings me back to, you know, it grounds me. Because they're, you know, they're so innocent and so joyful and so, you know, full of exploration and wonder about the world. And so I look at things through their eyes and I'm just like, okay, now my cup's been refilled and I can go on.
That's so smart. It's so healing to be around little kids.
Absolutely.
I love it. Yeah. And dogs. You have a greyhound also. You have 2 greyhounds.
I have 2 greyhounds.
And I have a greyhound. And I find being around him so soothing.
Yes.
You know, he's so just, first of all, I've never seen a dog sleep as deeply as he does. Like, and as often. Like, there's something about them. They just crash. And it's and that's relaxing for you to be around.
Exactly.
And their soft little muzzles, I'm always like,
Mhm.
I must pet him like 90 times a day. And I feel like it's so good for us.
Yeah,
It's just been
absolutely.
really good
Yeah.
for us. We
Yeah.
actually went on a greyhound event yesterday, and it was a ghost walk in Flemington, New Jersey, where I don't know if you know, but the Lindbergh trial, part of the Lindbergh trial
Okay.
was held there. And so there's ghosts in the courthouse. There's ghosts, all throughout. There's a lot of old houses. So this was a fundraiser for the greyhounds, and you could bring one greyhound. I think he said one needle nose. It's the
Yeah.
guy that runs it is so funny.
Yeah.
And I love these things because, first of all, it's really interesting and you get a nice walk. But I love seeing my dog with other dogs, and I
Mm.
love how they love each other. It's so cute.
Yes.
And they
Yeah.
had two little whippets, the smaller
Yeah.
ones.
Yep.
I was like, can I just hug every dog? It
Yeah.
was just like so much fun. But I think that, having a pet is so important, especially with the work that you do. Having two pets. You need two pets.
Yes. They ground me. They remind me to be in the moment and
Yes.
to not get, way off out there somewhere, and worrying about things that just being right in the moment is a huge thing for me. So, and they do that very well, don't they?
Aw, I
They're
saw
yeah.
him. Yeah, little
Yeah,
face.
they're both right here
I
with
just
me.
I just love that breed. I fell in
Yeah.
love with them. They're
Oh,
just so sweet.
they are my dog. I was always a cat person until I found
Me too.
greyhounds.
But to have this dog, we had to sign a contract that said we wouldn't have cats.
Yeah, yeah.
Any small animals or have small children around. So, and he's been pretty good, except, well, there was that one squirrel. It's like before
Yeah,
the squirrels got smart about how fast he could run. Anyway, so
there was that one rabbit on ours, as
yeah.
well. So yeah,
That's what they're trained
yeah,
to do that, and they're
yeah.
very good at it. So is there anything else you would like us to know?
No, I think that's all. This has been a lovely, lovely conversation. Thank you, Lynn. I really
I'm just
appreciate
such a fan of yours. I can barely hide it.
it. Oh my
I just
goodness.
love what you're doing, and I
Thank
love
you.
who you are, and I love how you explain it for us so we can. We don't understand it, and now we have a feel for it, a little bit more of a feel for it, and we can be. What I really love is that we can be more. I want people to listen to your podcast for sure, but if we go about our lives and we run into this,
Yeah,
we can be more understanding and
yes,
know that they're on a journey and it's very difficult. So
very.
I thank you for that.
Yeah.
And your time. I know you're busy and you gave me a whole hour. It's like fantastic.
Oh,
So
thank you.
we just want to mention again that you can find Kreed Revere on the Estranged Heart podcast, and it's wherever you find your podcasts. And I'll put the link in my show notes. And is there anything else you would like to recommend? I'll put your website in there.
Yeah, no, I think that's all. 2023,
Okay.
there will be a book coming at the end of 2023.
There
So
will be. What will
yeah,
that be about?
that is going to be my memoir of my estrangement story, and journey. So yeah.
Fantastic. And so even more people will be touched and they'll learn. That's so good. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
All right, I'll see you Wednesday.
Awesome. Sounds great.
We
Thanks,
have a
Lynn.
meeting, right? We have a meeting
Yes,
this week.
yes, we
I look
do.
forward to it.
Absolutely. Me too.
And
Thank
take
you
care.
again.